Welcome to another RBHS P with Mr. Dalton video. This is going to be the first of two videos when we're looking at performance enhancing drugs in sport, tied in with our new achievement standard 91502. Today's video is going to put a case forward for permitting the use of performance enhancing drugs in sport, and the second video will be a retort of this video. So let's get started. Dr. Sam Schuster has made a strong case for the deregulation of performance-enhancing drugs in sport throughout his career. This is a polarizing topic and in some respects considered taboo by many. Dr. Schuster is not alone in his view, as I'll catalogue today. There are many other voices looking to disrupt the status quo of performance-enhancing drugs in sport. There are so many pressures that athletes face in first emerging and then aiming for glory. Some would argue that as humans we have maximised our athletic potential, and gains above this may now be considered as suspicious. We see all around the world of sports that the doping cases keep coming and performances keep improving. The 2012 Olympics saw 66 Olympic records and 30 world records. Our own Valerie Adams was a victim of a drug cheat in her competition. While she was retrospectively awarded the gold medal, it was not quite the same, and she said so herself. I'm going to show you a very short clip of Lance Armstrong. It gives an insight into the psyche of an athlete who did dope and the decisions that went around that. The pressure to succeed will test every athlete's morals and ethics, especially when it can be argued that the testing agencies are always behind the eight ball when it comes to catching drug cheats.
When it comes to the doping, would you do it again?
If I was racing in 2015, no, I wouldn't do it again, because I don't think you have to do it again. If you take me back to 1995, when it was completely and totally pervasive, I'd probably do it again. People don't like to hear that.
But that's the honest answer.
Yeah, that's the honest answer. It's an answer that needs some explanation. And it's, I look at everything, when I made that decision, when my teammates made that decision, when the whole peloton made that decision. We get it. It was a bad decision in an imperfect time, but it happened.
What this interview shows is the moral and ethical dilemma that faces athletes potentially that are involved in sports, that there is prevalent use of performance-enhancing drugs. If their competitors are getting away with the use of performance-enhancing drugs, then a clean athlete has a tough decision to make. Currently, many athletes are competing cleanly, i.e. without drugs, while their competitors are cheating. And thus, we don't have a level playing field. The shocking revelations of performance-enhancing drug use by star athletes has been a repeating occurrence in the world of professional sports. Some of the more recent notables include Lance Armstrong, Yankee star Alex Rodriguez, American sprinters Tyson Gay and Justin Gatlin, as well as Jamaican Asafa Powell, and more closer to home, recently members of the Cronulla Sharks NRL team were embroiled in a doping scandal. This has raised questions about how effective organisations such as the World Anti-Doping Agency, commonly referred to as WADA, are in enforcing clean athletic competition. The frequency of such discoveries and the seemingly incapability of officials in catching drug users before major sporting events, as well as concerns over doping becoming an accepted practice in sports, has led some to consider a radical change: the legalisation of performance-enhancing drugs. There's arguably no sport that's had more scandal in terms of performance-enhancing drugs than cycling, and in particular the Tour de France. In 1999, if all athletes eventually discovered of doping were removed, the winner of the Tour de France would have been the 7th place finisher. In 2000, the winner would have been the 10th place finisher, 4th in 2001, 10th in 2002, 5th in 2003, 8th in 2004, and 2005. More recent results are not definitive, since doping usually is discovered years later, But as the trend has shown, top finishers are usually those who dope in this event. We believe that rather than drive doping underground, use of drugs should be permitted under medical supervision. By allowing medically supervised doping, the drugs used could be assessed for a clearer view of what is dangerous and what is not. They also point to how an increasing portion of funding for organisations such as WADA comes from governments, and thus also from taxpayers. In terms of practicality regarding spending of government money, especially for developing nations, the paper notes the priorities should lie elsewhere from a public health perspective. Regarding health risks and the purchase of drugs from criminal sources, Professor Foddy says this: because doping is illegal, the pressure is to make performance enhancers undetectable rather than safe. Performance enhancers are produced or bought on the black market, and in this case, an athlete's health is certainly not the highest priority. The side effects of doping and the possibility of death as a result has long been an argument against the use of performance-enhancing drugs. Foddy, however, argues that legalisation and targeted research will lead to a reduction in health risks. Those that support the legalisation of performance-enhancing drugs will point to how effective testing has been or currently is. In the recent past, it was argued that the number of positive tests is an extremely poor indicator of the prevalence of doping. There is general recognition amongst those involved in elite sport that those testing positive represent only the tip of the iceberg. It is impossible to estimate precisely how big that iceberg is, but it is clearly very large. The science of drug testing has progressed, but it appears that dopers are always a step ahead. In many cases, as Brignoli describes, agencies are unable to stay ahead of the drug makers. They can only test for the markers of drugs which have been previously identified. A drug is undetectable until it is identified. And it's because of this that drug agencies such as WADA have developed new technologies. Currently, leading the charge, or supposedly leading the charge against drug cheats, is the concept of the biological passports. Biological passports have been developed and they measure physiological changes as opposed to direct detection techniques, which, as we've talked about, have failed in the past. Athletes give blood samples which develops a biological passport over time and creates individual reference ranges. There is certainly a perception or a swell of opinion that because the passport sets such stringent limits, it misses or fails to detect when doping has occurred. People point to the lack of convictions as proof of its ineffectiveness. Currently, the biological passport is not universally used in sport, further leading to questions about the validity of testing mechanisms in the world of sport to catch drug cheats. Lance Armstrong is a case in point. He was tested in competition and out of competition before and after EPO tests were implemented and before and after biological passports were introduced. But he was only caught through the forced testimony of his teammates, who turned him in for the chance to continue their own careers as confessed dopers, and many of them are still riding at the elite professional level. Let's look at the issue of drugs versus technology. We know sport is for enjoyment and competition, and usually aims to improve. But what is the difference between increasing skill and performance by training and taking drugs? Consider this. Dr. Schuster says, what is the difference between training at altitude and taking EPO to achieve a similar effect? And why are the strips on the nose absurdly believed to increase oxygen intake more acceptable than a drug which reduces airway resistance? There are those out there that argue that sport is taking advantage of many of the technological advancements and as a result are leading to more efficient and better performances. However, at the same time are ignoring the potential that performance-enhancing drugs have for doing the same thing. Let's look at the area of genetics and essentially the hand we're dealt by virtue of the parents we have and how that may influence the success we may have in sport. Now, the Olympic motto is faster, higher, stronger, or at least that's the English translation. And there's no doubt that we all love seeing this. There is nothing better than seeing the world's best athletes compete and redefine what we thought was previously impossible. Some would argue that currently, genetic predisposition is the largest determinant of athletic success. They also question if that is in the best interests of sport. In a report in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, Savulescu, Foddy and Clayton argue that through legalising performance-enhancing drugs, it will level the playing field. They say, the result will be that the winner is not the person who was born with the best genetic potential to be the strongest. Sport would be less of a genetic lottery. The winner will be the person with a combination of genetic potential, training, psychology, and judgment. Interesting notion. So in conclusion, the solution is to legalise performance-enhancing drugs. Let's move away from a system that has failed over time. Failed athletes, failed spectators. Let's level the playing field. And let's move towards shifting the focus to ensuring that the administration of performance-enhancing drugs is both safe and enforceable. Savulescu offers this. If an athlete doesn't fulfill a certain health criterion, exclude them from competition. For example, in cycling, if your hematocrit is too high, i.e. over 50%, you couldn't compete because your blood viscosity puts you at risk, whatever the cause. Thanks for watching another RBHSP with Mr. Dalton video. Remember, this is the first of 2 videos. While this video has looked at building a case for why we might legalise performance-enhancing drugs in sport, the next video will look at the argument against why we shouldn't legalise performance-enhancing drugs in sport.